you hoes. You need to find you someone else to call.
Then the slaughter of just under 1 million of them every year for the last almost 50 years is a historic tragedy on par with a Holocaust. From the outside perspective, I get why people would say there's a difference in how people view the preborn as to how people view, say, a 7-year-old who's being killed in the Holocaust. Like the visceral power and evil of the Nazis shoving full-grown human beings and small children into gas chambers can't be compared to a person who, even from a pro-life perspective, may not fully understand the consequences of their own decisions, or from a pro-choice perspective, fully understands the consequences, but just doesn't think that person is a person. That's actually different. So I understand both sides of it. I wasn't offended by Ye's comments in that way, though, because if you're a pro-life human being, then you do think that what's happening is a great tragedy on scale that involves the dehumanization of an entire class of people, the preborn.
So philosophically, you understand the comparison.
I do. Sure.
So in his comments, in the jumping from the individual to the group, I'd like to ask you, you're one of the most effective people in the world at attacking the left. And sometimes it can slip into attacking the group. Do you worry that that's the same kind of oversimplification that Ye is doing about Jewish people that you can sometimes do with the left as a group?
So when I speak about the left, I'm...
Uh-oh. You got my guy Ben Shapiro. You know what I'm saying? We got your guy Fleezus. We got that YZY. And you know, we gonna get into it, man. We gonna really get into it today, man. You feel me? Ben Shapiro spoke on some things. You know, if y'all don't know who Ben Shapiro is the dude that Ben Shapiro is the dude that basically he's the founder of Daily Wire. And you know that film, The Greatest Lie Ever Told, is actually his, you know. Like it has a lot to do with him, right? He's the person who put up the money. He's the person who put it out. He's the person who you know, gave Candace Owens the green light to make this film, right? This is their film. This is their film. This is the Daily Wire. This is all his doing. You feel me? This is their stuff right here, man. This is they doing. So we got Candace Owens, one of Candace Owens' backers, you know, who is Ben Shapiro. He pulled up to the Lex Friedman show. He pulled up over there. Shout out to Lex Friedman. Great dude. Great show. You know, he is definitely on track to securing a nice big podcast deal. Y'all know who I am. I'm the most wise. Fleezus. This is YZY Season Part 4. Shout out to everyone that's tuned in. Shout out to everyone who emails me, and the fans reaching out to me, and all the Kanye fans and all that, appreciating what I do. Before you condemn the flick, before you condemn the film, I really want y'all to go and give it a chance. You feel me? You know, I'm gonna get into a couple of things today. You know, it's gonna be a hard month to get through. We lost Takeoff, we lost some people, he died, we lost a couple people, man. It's gonna be a rough one to get through and all that. But we gonna get through it, y'all. You heard? You know? So let's get into it. Let's get into what Ben Shapiro had to say. But before we even do that, I want y'all to understand something. That no man is above reproach. So I want y'all to understand that, you know,
If you realize
even
that you're
Ben
on,
make
on
mistakes.
the wrong side of history, to switch sides. Very few people in history seem to be strong enough to do that.
I mean, I think that the answer, I hope, would be yes. You never know until the time comes, and you have to do it. I will say that having heterodox opinions in a wide variety of areas is something that I have done before. I'm the only person I've ever heard of in public life who actually has a list on their website of all the dumb, stupid things
great.
I've ever said. So where I go through and I either say this is why I still believe this, or this is why what I said was terrible and stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that list will get a lot longer.
Yeah, look
as the
forward
years go on.
to new additions to that.
Yeah,
list.
exactly.
Yeah, it actually is a super, super long list. People should check it out. And it's quite honest and raw. What do you think about, it's interesting to ask you,
So let's get into it, y'all. Let's get into that main source. Let's get into what we here for. Ben Shapiro speaking on Kanye. I forgot I got a church next door, so let me go take care of that while y'all listen to this. Yeah.
please start
Let's
with a
get
difficult topic. What do you think about the comments made by Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, about Jewish people?
They're awful and anti-Semitic, and they seem to get worse over time. They started off with the bizarre DEFCON 3 tweet, and then they went into even more stereotypical garbage about Jews and Jews being sexual manipulators. I think that was the Pete Davidson, Kim Kardashian stuff, and then Jews running all of the media, Jews being in charge of the financial sector, Jewish people. I mean, I called it on my show, there's Sherman Nazism, and it is. I mean, it's like right from Protocols of the Elders of Zion type stuff.
Do you think those words come from pain? Where do they come from?
And you know, it's always hard to try and read somebody's mind. I mean, what he looks like to me, just having experience in my own family with people who are bipolar, is he seems like a bipolar personality. He seems like somebody who is in the middle of a manic episode, and when you're manic, you tend to say a lot of things that you shouldn't say, and you tend to believe that they're the most brilliant things ever said.
So let's rewind that a little bit, because he said something that I want to kind of highlight.
Jews running all of the media, Jews
because
being in charge
I
of the
feel
financial
as if
sector,
I myself
Jewish
follow
people. I mean,
the Jewish faith to some degree.
I called it on my show, there's Sherman Nazism, and it is. I mean, it's like right from Protocols of the Elders of Zion type stuff.
So what is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion? So the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, right? That here is this. Protocols of the Elders of Zion, or the Protocols of the Meetings of the Learned Elders of Zion, is a fabricated anti-Semitic text purporting to describe a Jewish plan for global domination. Now, I know some of you guys say don't use Wikipedia and stuff like that. I understand. But me personally, you know, I like to do things from a layman's point of view. You feel me? I like to do things for the average Joe, the average person. You know, hold on, something just happened. Something just fucked up. I hate when that happens. Hold on. Something. Jesus Christ. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that. Let me just do two things real quick. Let me just... Sorry. Yeah, right. So, let me just fix this for you guys. So, yeah, Elders of Zion. Elders Elders of Zion is shucks. Jesus Christ, what is going on here? What? Why can't you get these things to work when you need them to work? Let's see something. So you're trying to tell me that all of my headphones are dead right now? That's what you're gonna tell me, that all of my headphones are dead? Jesus Christ, man. Listen, today is one of those days, man. We're gonna get through it though. We might have to. There we go. I'm about to say. Alright, so there we go. So anyway, the Elders of Zion is a fabricated anti-Semitic text. But like I was saying, I use on Wikipedia and stuff like that because I try to do this thing from a layman's point of view. You feel me? For the average person. So anybody, any average, any day person could click on this video and understand everything that this person is talking about or whatever the case may be. That's what news is for. It's to make information bite-sized, supposed to make more complex things available for the average everyday person so that they can all do their civic duty and participate in voting and other duties as an American citizen. So let's get back into it. The Elders of Zion, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Protocols of the Meetings of the Learned Elders of Zion is a fabricated anti-Semitic text purporting to describe Jewish plan for the global domination. The hoax was plagiarized from several earlier sources. Some not anti-Semitic in nature. It was first published in Russia in 1903, translated into multiple languages, and disseminated internationally into the early part of the 20th century. It played a key part in popularizing belief in the international Jewish conspiracy. Distillations of the work were assigned by some German teachers as if factual to be read by German school children after the Nazis came to power in 1933. Despite being exposed as fraudulent by the British newspaper The Times in 1921, the German Frankfurter Zeitung in 1924, and the German Zeitung in 1924, it remains widely available in numerous languages in print and on internet, and continues to be presented by neo-fascist, fundamentalist, and anti-Semitic groups as a genuine document. It has been described as probably the most influential work of anti-Semitism ever written. So, I've definitely read the Protocols of Zion, and it's pretty much that, it's like supposed to be some Judaic people, talking about how they're gonna like take over the world and all this other stuff and all this other nonsense or whatever the case may be. It's a whole bunch of bullshit, The Protocols is fabricated documents purporting to be factual. Textual evidence shows that it could not have been produced prior to 1901. It is known that the title Sergei Nilus widely distributed editions contains the dates 1902 to 1903, and it's likely that the document was actually written at the time in Russia, despite Nilus' attempt to cover this up by inserting French-sounding words into his edition. Argues that it was manufactured in the months after a Russian Zionist Congress in September 1902, that it was originally a parody of Jewish idealism meant for internal circulation among anti-Semites until it was decided to clean it up and publish as if it were real. Self-contradictions and various testimonies show that the individuals involved, including the text's initial publisher, Pavel Krushkin, deliberately obscured the origins of the text and lied about it in the decades afterwards. Its placement of the forgery in 1902, if Russia is correct, it was written in the beginning of a series of anti-Jewish programs in the Russian Empire, in which thousands of Jews were killed or fled the country. Many of the people were demilitarized suspects, and the involvement of forgery were directly responsible for inciting the programs. See, this shit really go deep though, and you really got to understand that a lot of this anti-Semitic stuff, this shit has like a very, very, very deep-rooted history that always sometimes connects back to like Germany or Russia or the Soviets in some weird shape or form. But we're gonna let Ben continue to speak on it.
We should start with a difficult topic.
He really was like, getting in. So
even if he is an anti-Semite, and I have no reason to...
Let's get back to
Jews and Jews being sexual manipulators. I think that's the Pete Davidson, Kim Kardashian stuff. And then Jews running all of the media, Jews being in charge of the financial sector, Jewish people. I mean, I called it on my show, there's Sturmer Nazism, and it is. I mean, it's like right from Protocols of the Elders of Zion type stuff.
Do you think those words come from pain? Where do they come from?
And it's always hard to try and read somebody's mind. And what he looks like to me, just having experience in my own family with people who are bipolar, is he seems like a bipolar personality. He seems like somebody who is in the middle of a manic episode, and when you're manic, you tend to say a lot of things that you shouldn't say, and you tend to believe that they're the most brilliant things ever said. The Washington Post did an entire piece speculating about how bipolarism played into the kind of stuff that Ye was saying, and it's hard for me to think that it's not playing into it, especially because even if he is an anti-Semite, and I have no reason to suspect he's not, given all of his comments, if he had an ounce of common sense, he would stop at a certain point. And
we actually have this document that he speaks of, this article that he speaks of. We actually have it here. Let's see what we have here. What does bipolar disorder feel like? Can it explain Kanye's behavior? This was published October 11th by Teddy Bar. Erratic behavior by the musician formerly known by Kanye West has spurred widespread discussion on social media about the condition. Now, I could listen to it. Let's see something, because all right, let's do that then. Hold on, let's do this then. So hold on, let's do this. Hold on, because I think it's important that we do have these discussions, man. I think it's important that we do allow these discussions to be had and to be said by very, very intellectual people. Sometimes I ain't gonna really respect what I gotta say. I'm just another black nigga. Feel me? But when y'all hear white people say it, y'all be on their balls and shit. So
what does bipolar disorder feel like? Can it explain Kanye's behavior? Erratic behavior by the musician, formerly known as Kanye West, has spurred widespread discussion on social media about the condition. The rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, has a history of commenting on mental illness through his art. On a 2018 album cover, West included a telling quote, "I hate being bipolar, it's awesome." In the song Yikes, he called bipolar disorder his superpower.
See, when you try to swag it, try to finesse it, there's always some nonsense happening. There we go.
Anti-Semitic posts on Instagram and Twitter. The comments, as well as other displays, including a rambling appearance with conservative talk show host Tucker Carlson and sporting a White Lives Matter t-shirt during Paris Fashion Week, have spurred a number of social media discussions about whether the behavior could be explained by mental illness. While there is no way to know whether West's behavior or comments are related to his mental health, most experts agree that people with bipolar disorder can behave erratically and may at times lose their filter and say or do socially inappropriate things. The Washington Post spoke to psychiatrists, therapists, and people diagnosed with bipolar disorder and asked them what it feels like to live with the condition, how it is treated, and how much it can affect a person's behavior. Here's what they said. What does bipolar disorder feel like? Wenshawn Miller, 35, a therapist based in Charlotte, sees patients with a number of conditions, including bipolar disorder, and also lives with the condition himself. He said that when he is in a manic phase, he feels like he's a superhero. "It's like you've got a battery pack on your back, and you're always on go," said Miller, the founder of a non-profit group dedicated to providing mental health services to Black and brown communities. Bipolar disorder can cause extreme mood swings, from frenzied, manic, even euphoric highs to devastating bouts of depression. Symptoms can vary widely from person to person, and the onset of manic highs and depressive lows can be occasional or frequent and last for periods of days to months. The condition can be largely controlled through medication and therapy. Cameron Kasky, a gun control advocate who has spoken publicly about living with bipolar disorder, said that he has gone from the darkest depths to feeling like he's the coolest kid in the world. Kasky said that in a manic state, he tends to spend more money and make bolder, less thoughtful decisions. Mania is something that you can feel very powerful with, Kasky said. And it is a powerful thing because it elevates your thought processes, has your neurons firing so fast. But it can lead you to make rash decisions. Robert Hirschfeld, a physician and professor of clinical psychiatry at Weill Cornell Medicine who specializes in the treatment of bipolar disorder and depression in adults, said that in the manic state, people often engage in risky behavior such as gambling or having sex with multiple partners. They may speak extremely quickly, stringing together a number of different ideas. At the highest point in the mania, some people can have delusions that they're the smartest person in the world or the richest, Hirschfeld said. Many people with bipolar disorder experience bouts of creativity during the manic phase, and some are hesitant to use drug treatments. A number of celebrities, including the singer Demi Lovato and the television host Jane Pauley, have spoken openly about living with bipolar disorder. Lovato has said in interviews that during a manic phase she felt invincible and could stay up until 5 a.m. and write 7 songs in one night.
Wow.
People describe it as a natural high, said Isha Metzger, a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Georgia. They have racing thoughts, and those thoughts oftentimes do lead to productivity that they're not experiencing when they're in a more distressed state. What happens after a manic episode? Experts say that much of the suffering of bipolar disorder often comes from the swing down into a depressive phase, in which the person can feel sad, disinterested, and hopeless about everything. Someone in a depressive state can sleep for 12, even 16 hours at a time, Hirschfeld said. Experts say cases of bipolar disorder are most often diagnosed when a person is in this depressive state because that is when people tend to seek treatment. The mania can cause huge messes and destroy people's lives and families in a short period of time, Hirschfeld said. But it's the depression that can cause the most harm in the long term. Can bipolar disorder make you do strange things? West's erratic behavior has prompted a wide discussion on social media about whether bipolar disorder can cause people to make racist statements or behave in ways that many others find offensive. After disclosing his diagnosis, West later backtracked, attributing some behaviors to lack of sleep. But in a 2019 interview with David Letterman, he spoke more openly.
And that's
I
true,
ramp
though.
up and I go high, West said. If you don't take medication every day to keep you at a certain state,
He said he's
you
about
have
to go to
potential
sleep before
ramp
he
up,
made that
and it
tweet.
can even take you to a point where you can even end up in the hospital. And you start acting erratic, as TMZ would put it. Most experts agree that during a manic phase, people with bipolar disorder may say or do things they later regret. An otherwise loyal partner may have an affair while in a manic state, for instance, or a person may engage in more risk-taking, use drugs or gamble, or spend money well beyond their means. Research shows that even arrest and incarceration are potential complications of bipolar disorder. What I will say, without getting into anything about a specific person, is that it is not unusual for people to do things that they would never, ever do, Hirschfeld said. I've had so many cases of people who are married happily who have never even thought about cheating on their spouse, and then they become manic, and they become hypersexual, and they go out and start picking people up off the street. They're unbelievably remorseful. Over time,
That's true,
it can
though.
become difficult to distinguish between a person's action and the illness. The question for any specific act or behavior, as to whether my brain made me do it, is it me or my illness, is usually just too entangled and difficult, said Steve Hyman, a professor at Harvard and the director of the Stanley Center for Psychiatric Research at the Broad Institute of MIT. Courts struggle with this all the time. Often it is impossible to find a neat separation between a person as they would have been if not ill, and the influence of a mental illness. Metzger, the professor at University of Georgia who runs a lab dedicated to mental health research and education, said that racism itself is not a mental health disorder and that a mental health disorder does not excuse racism. Those beliefs are not a symptom of having a bipolar disorder, Metzger said. Certainly, the lack of a filter might cause them to spill out. What happens in the brain during a manic episode? Bipolar disorder seems to be linked to both genetics and environmental factors, and it can run in families. The condition is not fully understood, but it appears to be, at least in part, because of chemical imbalances in the brain. During a manic state, a person living with the disorder appears to have a higher level of excitatory neurotransmitters, such as dopamine, in the brain, said Chase Anderson, a professor in child and adolescent psychiatry at the University of California at San Francisco. We're still studying how this exactly works, Anderson said. The University of Georgia's Metzger said people describe a manic phase as a natural high in which they have higher self-esteem and racing thoughts, a state that often leads to greater productivity. People often do report enjoying their manic states, despite that some of that mania can lead to risky decisions being made, Metzger said. Scientists at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard recently found a gene that puts a person at higher risk of both bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And scientists have discovered other genes that all have a small effect on whether someone is predisposed to bipolar disorder, Hyman said. What's the link between bipolar disorder and sleep? Anderson said psychiatrists see bipolar disorder as a disorder of sleep because disrupted sleep often is one of the first symptoms clinicians recognize in patients. For the most severe type of bipolar disorder, people often will stay up for days on end, Anderson said. If you don't get your usual amount of sleep, you're tired, Hirschfeld said. But, when someone is manic, they get 2-3 hours of sleep and they're not vaguely tired. Lack of sleep or a sleep disruption, such as a transatlantic flight, can also trigger a manic episode. Lots of people have their first episode after transatlantic flight, Hirschfeld said. The disruption of normal circadian rhythms can absolutely precipitate a manic episode. How is bipolar disorder diagnosed? 2 decades ago, Hirschfeld created a 13-part questionnaire that is widely used by physicians to screen patients for the disorder. Among its questions, the assessment asks whether a person has felt so hyper that they got into trouble, whether they felt more self-confident than usual, if they had done things viewed by others as foolish or risky, were unusually interested in sex, or had engaged in overspending that caused problems. If you score high on the questionnaire, Hirschfeld said, it doesn't mean you have bipolar disorder. Instead, it just means you should be evaluated by a mental health professional who treats the condition. The trouble is that bipolar disorder can sometimes be misdiagnosed because the condition is a bit of a chameleon that can look similar to personality disorder, depression, and other illnesses, Hyman said.
And they just get into basically what medications would basically help you take care of that. So let's get back into this, because Ben Shapiro makes a very good analysis, a very good point. This was very early on. This article was written October 11th, Unfortunately, I guess Adidas never got this memo. You know what I'm saying? I guess nobody ever got this memo. But, at the end of the day, people don't care. They don't really give a damn. They don't care. They don't care about your bipolarness. They don't care about none of that stuff. You feel me? All they care about is how can they dismantle, destroy, and disintegrate a black man. That's all. That's all that ever matters in America. Let's go.
Polarism tends to drive you well past the point where common sense applies. So, I would imagine it's coming from that. You would stop at a certain point. And bipolarism tends to drive you well past the point where common sense applies. So, I would imagine it's coming from that. From his comments, I would also imagine that he's doing the logical mistake that a lot of anti-Semites or racists or bigots do, which is, somebody hurt me. That person is a Jew. Therefore, all Jews are bad. And that jump from a person did something to me I don't like, who's a member of a particular race or class, and therefore everybody of that race or class is bad. That's textbook bigotry, and that's pretty obviously what Ye's engaging in here.
So jumping from the individual to the group.
That's the way he's been expressing it, right? He keeps talking about his Jewish agents. And I watched your interview with him, and you kept saying, so just name the agents, right? Just name the people who are screwing you. And he wouldn't do it. Instead, he just kept going back to the general, the group, the Jews in general. That's textbook bigotry. And if it were put in any other context, he would probably recognize it as such.
To the degree his words fuel hate in the world, what's the way to reverse that process? What's the way to alleviate the hate?
I mean, when it comes to alleviating the kind of stuff that he's saying, obviously debunking it, making clear that what he's saying is garbage. But the reality is that I think that for most people who are in any way engaged with these issues, I don't think they're being convinced to be anti-Semitic by Ye. I mean, I think that there's a group of people who may be swayed that anti-Semitism is acceptable because Ye is saying what he's saying, and he's saying so very loudly, and he's saying it over and over. But I think that, for example, there were these signs that were popping up in Los Angeles saying Ye is right. Well, that group's been out there posting anti-Semitic signs on the freeways for years. And there are groups like that posting anti-Semitic signs where I live in Florida. They've been doing that for years, well before.
But I feel like they took Kanye West as like this person to act like he created all of this. You know what I'm saying? Like he started these like neo-Nazi movements and stuff like that. Like the way he's being condemned, or even like a Kyrie Irving and stuff like that, right? Because we see now they've kind of gotten tired of whipping Kanye, right? Like they got tired of whipping that horse into the ground, and now they have their eyes on a new target, which is Kyrie Irving. But in Kyrie's case, much like Kanye West's case in some way, shape, or form, right? Because Kanye, he got sued for referencing a documentary that he didn't even create, right? Which is the greatest lie ever sold, or whatever the case may be. I began the broadcast with that. Now Kyrie Irving is going through the same thing, right? He's going through the same thing, but he's going through it because of promoting this film and book series called Hebrew to Negroes, in which now we have the author and writer Ronald Dalton Jr. coming out speaking, and he says, "I vehemently reject and condemn any forms of prejudice, hatred towards any person, regardless of all these other things, ancestry, as well as violence, bullying, discrimination, black Jewphobia, and the misuse of the term anti-Semitism. The African diaspora that was sent to the Americas and the Caribbean via the transatlantic slave trade are ethnically the Israelites of the Bible from the lineage of Shem. Therefore, myself or anyone today who is a descendant of Shem's 5 sons cannot be anti-Semitic as a Shemite." If y'all want to read more of this, it's in my community section. Y'all could really get in tune with that right there. But let's get back into what we here for.
Ye was saying this sort of stuff. It's just like latest opportunity to kind of jump on that particular bandwagon. But listen, I think that people do have a moral duty to call that stuff out.
So there is a degree to which it normalizes that kind of idea that Jews control the media, Jews control X institution. Is there a way to talk about a high representation of a group, like Jewish people, in a certain institution like the media or Hollywood and so on, without it being a hateful conversation?
Sure, of course. A high percentage of higher than statistically represented in the population percentage of Hollywood agents are probably Jewish. A higher percentage of lawyers generally are probably Jewish. A high percentage of accountants are probably Jewish. Also, a higher percentage of engineers are probably Asian. Like, the statistical truths are statistical truths. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about the nature of the people who are being talked about. There are a myriad of reasons why people might be disproportionately in one arena or another, ranging from the cultural to sometimes the genetic. I mean, there are certain areas of the world where people are better long-distance runners because of their genetic adaptations in those particular areas of the world, that's not racist. That's just fact. And what starts to get racist is when you are attributing a bad characteristic to an entire population based on the notion that some members of that population are doing bad things.
Yeah, there's a jump.
Not gonna agree with that. I can agree with that to some degree. You know, maybe we should get out that habit, that bad habit of attributing, saying, yo, F the whole group because 10 people from that group done did us wrong. You know, maybe we should put a name on that bullet, speak directly to the people that we have problems with. You know, I think a lot of times we generalize things to speak in subliminal, right? Instead of saying Tom, Dick, and Harry stole my money, we say white folks, the man stole my money. You feel me? But we know that the only white folks we're in close proximity to is Tom, Dick, and Harry, and we hope that Tom, Dick, and Harry will get that message. But unfortunately, what Tom, Dick, and Harry has done, they have you know, basically weaponized anti-whiteness, reverse racism, you know, this reverse anti-Semitism, as Ronald Jr. states. So maybe we should start being very more direct and straightforward with who we're speaking about, so that we can know who the direct problems are. Now, that may get problematic as well, because people will start saying, well, we're too confrontational, we're too aggressive, we're doxing, you know. But I would like to maybe try that method. You know, unfortunately, they're going to keep trying to move the goalposts back. That's just how they play the game. But a nigga like me, I'm a. If you tell me this is the rules, I'm gonna try to play by those rules. You feel me? That's just how it is for me personally. But I think it's very important that we let a you know, a Jewish member speak on the situation, you know, especially someone who directly profited from some of Kanye's statements. So I find it a little bit ironic, but he's still on code. He's still on code with his people. He's standing 10 toes, you know, with his faith. And us as black folks, we gotta take heed to that. We gotta really sit there and be like, yo, you see how this, you know what I'm saying? This is a very controversial, you know, what some people would feel like is a right-wing pundit. Yet and all, he still stands on code with liberal Jewish owners who've taken from Kanye West for promoting a film that he is directly responsible for. He owns the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire put out the greatest lie ever sold. The film in which Kanye West referenced on Drink Champs, that got Drink Champs episode taken down. Yeah, I need to see how this game is being played. You know, Kanye West got a song called Welcome to the Sci-Fi, in which he speaks about nothing really, but the chorus is everything you need to hear is welcome to the sci-fi, make a choice, oxygen or Wi-Fi. And it's like, at this point, we are in the future. This is the sci-fi. This is the films that we're living. What movies like was it Cyber? Blade Runner. Blade Runner took place in 2019. The first one. We're 3 years past that. The next one took place in 2049. They had to reset it. We're at that point of the Great Reset, where everyone in position is vowing for power. Today is the elections. There's a cost associated with voting. Today I paid that cost. You have to understand that right now, we're going into a whole different stratosphere. And I find what Ben Shapiro is about to say very, very, very important. Very important. Because he speaks to how democracies become fascist societies if we, the citizens, are not vigilant and participating in our civic duty to selecting credible, competent leaders. We cannot be persuaded by fake news and fear. We must make educated decisions as foundational Black Americans to restore the republic and a true democracy with citizens that can afford to live with livable wages, and able to pass down generational wealth regardless of skin color. Because for far too long has white people been the only people able to pass down generational wealth.
It's also possible that record label owners as a group have a kind of culture that F's over artists.
Sure.
Doesn't treat artists fairly. And it's also possible that there's a high representation of Jews in the group of people that own record labels. But it's that small but a very big leap that people take from the group that own record labels to all Jews.
For sure. And I think that one of the other issues also is that anti-Semitism is fascinating because it breaks down into so many different parts. Meaning that if you look at sort of different types of anti-Semitism, if you're a racist against Black people, it's typically because you're racist based on the color of their skin. If you're racist against the Jews, you're anti-Semitic, then there are actually a few different ways that breaks down. Right? You have anti-Semitism in terms of ethnicity, which is like Nazi-esque anti-Semitism. You have Jewish parentage, you have a Jewish grandparent, therefore your blood is corrupt and you are inherently going to have bad properties. Then there's sort of old school religious anti-Semitism, which is that the Jews are the killers of Christ, or the Jews are the sons of pigs and monkeys, and therefore Judaism is bad, and therefore Jews are bad. And sort of in the way that you get out of that anti-Semitism, historically speaking, is mass conversion, which most anti-Semitism for a couple thousand years actually was not ethnic. It was much more rooted in this sort of stuff, right? If a Jew converted out of the faith, then the anti-Semitism was quote unquote alleviated. And then there's
and that is what I was speaking with a young lady. I believe it was a lady. It could have been a male. I'm not sure. But I got an email from a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints concerning one of these YZY SZN videos, speaking on why would these people want to only control Black people and not control white people? And my response to the supporter, my cyber family, my response was they do control you. That's how they keep white supremacy going. That's how they keep it thriving. The most controlled people in America are white people. their thoughts, their actions, where their money goes. It's some of the most controlled things in the world. And that's what gives white supremacy its power. That's what creates the structure. Because they're so controlled and on point and on code. But yes, there was many people who would convert out of the Jewish faith, right? Because as long as you're white, it's almost like being an X-Men. It's almost the same comparison I made with the X-Men when people tried to say that the X-Men was minorities. They was compared to black people. And I said, listen, if Cyclops walked through Central Park with his glasses on, unless he has on his X-Men regalia, people wouldn't know that he's an X-Men. He would just be a regular white person. But I can put my glasses on and walk through the park, and I will still be treated as a black man. I will still be treated as, as a minority. I will still be oppressed and treated in some of the most inhumane and despicable ways, right? Passive aggressively. That can bear upon one mind and create suicidal ideation, which is why you see the increase in black suicides. I went to vote today, and I could count on one hand how much fellow black Americans I've seen voting. Is it because they don't want to vote? Is it because they're uninformed? Is it because they have to work? I don't know. But whatever is being done to suppress the black vote, it is working. And I do not mean to digress. But when you speak about Jewish people converting, we have a lot of newly Jewish converts, right? We have a lot of people that was Christian and they become they get into these music industries, these movie industries, and they would convert to Judaism. They will marry into Judaism to get that minority protection status, even though you're wealthy, to kind of be put in good graces and have better networking and business opportunities, right? Being ingratiated inside of that synagogue, right? Was Madonna always Jewish? Was Lenny Kravitz born Jewish? You see, it's a lot that goes into this. So when you see people say, or Lex Friedman say, speak to the individual, I could get with that. Because to some degree, a lot of these people that you find as like Jewish people in the industry, they're like first generation, second generation Jews. Their lineage don't stretch all the way back down to the Holocaust, man. Some, not all. But does that mean that they should feel less impacted by anti-Semitic statements? No, they probably feel the same as Zach Hurt. But there are a lot of new converts. So when you're white, you can convert and get that protection. But when you're black, even if we call ourselves Jewish, we don't even have protection from the word anti-Semite, even if we identify as a Shemite, right? We don't get that protection even if we identify as a Shemite. We don't get that protection. this is why this white supremacy conversation is so nuanced. Because every angle that you try to attack it on, there's some counter angle there to protect it. Dave Chappelle just spoke on this with the LGBT, which is another angle that could give you a minority status as a white supremacist. And you will usually see these people in powerful positions take one or the other. If you're a heterosexual man, you can convert to Judaism. If you're a sexually deviant man, you can become LGBT. Both will protect you from the masses. It gets deep.
A sort of bizarre anti-Semitism that's political anti-Semitism, and that is members of a group that I don't like are disproportionately Jewish, therefore all Jews are members of this group or are predominantly represented in this group. So you'll see Nazis saying the communists are Jews. You'll see communists saying the Nazis are Jews. Or you'll see communists saying that the capitalists, rather, are Jews. And so that's the weird thing about anti-Semitism. It's kind of like the Jew is behind every corner. It's basically a big conspiracy theory. Unlike a lot of other forms of racism, which are not really conspiracy theory, anti-Semitism tends to be a conspiracy theory about the levers of power being controlled by a shadowy cadre of people who are getting together behind closed doors to control things.
Yeah, the most absurd illustration of anti-Semitism, just like you said, is Stalin versus Hitler over Poland, that every bad guy was a Jew.
Right.
It was like, so every enemy, there's a lot of different enemy groups, intellectuals, political, and so on, military, and behind any movement that is considered the enemy for the Nazis and any movement that's considered the enemy for the Soviet army are the Jews. What does the fact that Hitler took power teach you about human nature? When you look back at the history of the 20th century, what do you learn from that time?
I mean, there are a bunch of lessons to Hitler taking power. The first thing I think people ought to recognize about Hitler taking power is that the power had been centralized in the government before Hitler took it. So if you actually look at the history of Nazi Germany, the Weimar Republic had effectively collapsed. The power had been centralized in the chancellery and really under Hindenburg for a couple of years before that. And so it was only a matter of time until someone who was bad grabbed the power. And so the struggle between the Reds and the Browns in Nazism, in pre-Nazi Germany, led to this kind of up-spiraling of radical sentiment that allowed Hitler in through the front door, not through the back door. Right? He was elected.
So you think communists could have also taken power?
I mean, there's no question communists could have taken power. They were a serious force in pre-Nazi Germany.
Do you think there was an underlying current that would have led to an atrocity if the communists had taken power?
Wouldn't have been quite the same atrocity, but obviously the communists in Soviet Russia at exactly this time were committing the Holodomor.
Yeah.
Right. So there were very few good guys in terms of good parties. The moderate parties were being dragged by the radicals into alliance with them to prevent the worst case scenario from the other guy. Right. So if you look at, I'm sort of fascinated by the history of this period because it really does speak to how does a democracy break down. I mean, the 20s Weimar Republic was a very liberal democracy. How does a liberal democracy break down into complete fascism and then into genocide? And there's a character who was very prominent in the history of that time, named Franz von Papen, who was actually the second to last chancellor of the Republic before Hitler. So he was the chancellor, and then he handed over to Schleicher, and then Schleicher ended up collapsing, and that ended up handing power over to Hitler. It was Papen who had stumped for Hitler to become chancellor. Papen was a Catholic Democrat. He didn't like Hitler. He thought that Hitler was a radical and a nut job. But he also thought that Hitler, being a buffoon as he saw it, was going to essentially be usable by the right forces in order to prevent the communists from taking power, maybe in order to restore some sort of legitimacy to the regime because he was popular, in order for Papen to retain power himself. And then immediately after Hitler taking power, Hitler basically kills all of Papen's friends. Papen, out of quote-unquote loyalty, stays on. He ends up helping the Anschluss in Austria. Now, all this stuff is really interesting, mainly because what it speaks to is the great lie we tell ourselves is that people who are evil are not like us. They're a class apart. People who do evil things, people who support evil people, they're not like us. And that's an easy call. Everybody in history who has sinned is a person who's very different from me. Robert George, the philosopher over at Princeton, he's fond of doing a sort of thought experiment in his classes where he asks people to raise their hand if they had lived in Alabama in 1861. How many of you would be abolitionists? And everybody raises their hand. He says, of course that's not true. Of course that's not true. The best protection against evil is recognizing that it lies in every human heart and the possibility that it takes you over. And so you have to be very cautious in how you approach these issues. And the back and forth of politics, the sort of bipolarity of politics, the polarization in politics might be a better way to put it, makes it very easy to kind of fall into the rock'em sock'em robots that eventually could theoretically allow you to support somebody who's truly frightening and hideous in order to stop somebody who you think is more frightening and hideous. And you see this kind of language, by the way, now predominating almost all over the Western world, right? My political enemy is an enemy of democracy. My political enemy is going to end the republic. My political enemy is going to be the person who destroys the country we live in. And so that person has to be stopped by any means necessary. And that's dangerous stuff.
So the communists had to be stopped in Nazi Germany, and so they're the devil. And so any useful buffoon, as long as they're effective against the communists, would do. Do you ever wonder, because the people that are participating in evil may not understand that they're doing evil, do you ever sit back, in the quiet of your own mind and think, am I participating in evil?
I mean, so my business partner and I, one of our favorite...
Yeah, that's the real question, nigga. Do you see yourself as evil? And for the most part, if y'all want to see his answer, y'all can go see the Lex Friedman interview. But that's a good question to ask. Like, do you see yourself as participating in evil? When you promoting drill music, when you promoting, I'm speaking to myself personally. You're promoting drill music, when you promote things like FBA, to which some people could try to say like these weird things about this movement. Even my barber spoke to me, and I get the feeling that he's not like the most enthused about FBA as a movement. He didn't really have any opinion on it any way or the other. But good Jamaican brother, my aunt and all that, Jamaican aunt. Shout out to him. But I do sit back and ask myself that question sometimes. Am I participating in evil by voting Republican, by being conservative, by running a pro-black news channel, right? That sometimes I could leave out the negative aspects of a black story. I try to cover things from a pro-black perspective, right? Like if Fox News was for black people, how would they do it, right? And I think we need that, I think that we need that for our black renaissance. I think that we need that for where we're going. We need a channel that specifically speaks to us, that doesn't down us, even when we're down, even when we make a mistake or something like that. I'm gonna come on here and make it seem like the best thing that we could have done, because we need that. We need people like me. We need pro-black brothers that's blinded by the light, by the pro-black light that beams into the future. I think that for the most part, Ben Shapiro, kind of said it without saying it, but Kanye West rant was just a bipolar thing, a schizophrenic thing that shouldn't have been taken for more than what it was. And we wasted a month of our time a month of our time speaking and debating these bipolar rants. He should not have lost his contracts or nothing like that. He just needed 2 to 3 weeks to get some rest. That's all. But it is what it is, and we're here now. Now we're forced to have this conversation. How's it gonna play out? I don't know. But I know one thing. This is the end of Yeezy season. And until next year, well, I'm pretty sure when Kanye West will come back out and do some crazy nonsense, or at least next month, there will be no more Yeezy seasons. At least till like December 12th. So with that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this little series. And we will get back to reporting the things that we regularly report. 80 high to the guys. FBA all day. Peace and reparations. This series has been a blessing, y'all.